good morning, good afternoon to in-house counsel and in-house legal professionals from all across North America and the world. Welcome to In-House Connect. My name is Shai Mahoney. I'm the CEO and co-founder of In-House Connect, and I'm thrilled to have you here with us today. Thank you for spending your breakfast time or your lunch time with us, and thank you for spending the day before Thanksgiving with us, Thanksgiving Eve, I guess you can say. And special thanks to our wonderful sponsor, Summize, and our fantastic presenters today, starting with Martin Cotterill, Marie Widmer, and Jonny Jessop. Our international panel, no less, is going to teach us essential CLM principles for in-house counsels, and they will talk about key considerations when evaluating CLM solutions. This is our 71st event of the year, and I'm wondering, are you here for the first time, or have you tuned into an IHC webinar before? Looks like we have a 75-25 split. 75% are returning, so welcome back, and 25% are new. So welcome to In-House Connect, and I hope you enjoy the program. Today's program is Essential CLM Principles for In-House Counsel, Key Considerations when Evaluating CLM Solutions. And our panel features Martin Cotterill. Martin is a commercially focused lawyer with over 20 years experience who is leading and expanding Thought Machine's global legal team and corporate secretariat function. Prior to joining Thought Machine as general counsel, Martin was a senior partner in the commercial technology legal practices of both Taylor Wessing and Latham & Watkins. Martin specializes in the financial services sector and has advised many of the world's top-tier investment, commercial, and retail banks in the UK, Europe, and America. Next is Marie Widmer. Marie has 10 years of experience in the legal industry. She's held roles in biotech, fintech, and Web3, building out internal processes and launching tools and programs for legal, including CLM, e-billing, ticketing, and privacy. Her love for legal operations is driven by the people in this industry, and she founded Legal Ops Uncensored to build a global, inclusive legal tech community. She has also founded Amplifi Ops, an AI platform designed to make tech implementations suck less, or less suck, I don't know, I guess either way is good. Thank you, Marie. And for last but certainly not least, we have Jonny Jessop. Jonny is a solutions architect at Summize and has spent most of his career working in software with global clients. He works closely with Summize customers to ensure that the product meets all of their requirements, setting them on the path to CLM success. Very excited to have such a wonderful panel on today to teach us CLM essentials. And I've never really said this before, but I'm going to give it a shot. Here's Jonny.
Thank you very much, Shai. I appreciate that. Brilliant. So lovely to meet everybody on the webinar today. I can see everybody's already networking in the chat. It's fantastic. Great to get to know you all. Now we've been introduced, let me just talk through an agenda for today. So we are going to start with some pain points and horror stories, actually. So we want to find out what the world was like in different businesses before CLM. And so we've got Martin and Marie here with huge amounts of experience working in in-house teams and working with and without CLM solutions. So they're going to share some horror stories with us. And then we're going to have a look at the actual CLM evaluation process. Obviously, a lot of you are in the situation where you're looking at the market for CLM, you're having a look at your requirements, doing that evaluation. So we want to talk about what's important for different businesses and get Martin and Marie's experience with that. And then how collaborative should the process be? How do you involve the rest of the organization? How do you get everybody on board so everybody is firstly sharing requirements, but also on the same page with what they're actually looking for? Then I'm the tech guy, so I will go into the components of the CLM, look at different solution areas. So how will an actual solution work? What kind of things should you be looking for? And then we'll talk a bit more practically about how to implement. And Marie definitely will have lots of advice for us on implementing CLM software and managing a project. But first, we're going to start with a poll. So we'd like to know about your pain points around contracts. So what are your biggest pain points? We've got 3 suggestions here. So first of all is around storage. So you can't store them in one place or find them easily. And then we've got the intake process. So maybe your internal customers are the pain. They're just sending you stuff and it's inconsistent and you're not being able to track different types of matter. Or is it the actual internal review process? So the fact that you are kind of reviewing contracts manually and that's taking a lot of time. And it looks like it's pretty consistent across the board. It's a split, maybe a little bit more for contract review, Martin, what would your biggest pain point be when you started working in-house?
Well, when I sort of took over the function here, I think because we're not a volume contract business, that's important to say. So we don't have the problem of constant high volume of contract documents, although there is a bit of an asterisk to that I'll come back to. But our biggest one is because we deal with highly complex matters, really. We run the core of banks. We've got a whole bunch of folks that when we bring the contract, when we land this beast, getting the information and making sure everybody knows what they're doing and stop the constant kind of, ask legal kind of FAQ the whole time whenever anyone, because they don't read contracts. No one but legal reads contracts, right? So how do we get the business, the stuff that's in the contract from paper and lawyers and sort of commercial brains into security and data and all the functions that need to know. So that was the biggest one, is disseminating the contract information across the organization for me.
I see. Marie, what about you?
I think twofold for me. The first one is just the lack of context in the pre-CLM days, right? So starting a deal or picking up an amendment and just not even knowing where to start in terms of who was the last person to touch it, any special context with the company, any leverage that we may or may not have had. That was all missing at that point. And then I think second to that was just the lack of data, not consistently understanding who had signed off or approved on a contract prior to it going out for signature, maybe missing circumstances where red lines had been made and not accepted, and perhaps a final version had been generated without maybe having a clean version history. So I think those have been two of the biggest pain points for me.
I see. Well, I think that brings us neatly on to pre-CLM horror stories. So, those are the challenges, but what I'd like to understand is kind of what situations have you been in your career? On our last webinar, we had Susan who was brought in to organize 12,000 contracts, I believe it was, and nobody really knew where they were, strewn across filing cabinets and local drives. And to organize that is a huge job. What kind of scenarios have you experienced in your careers? We'll start with Martin.
Well, both within the organization and, I'll be honest with you, seeing it from our customer organizations as well. I won't name names, but there are many very large, quite important and big institutions out there who on more than one occasion have asked us if we would give them a copy of their contract because they've lost it. So I suspect that happens quite a lot across many industries, and considering the importance of it. So I think CLM is a topic across that maybe some of the other many institutions need to sort out. The other, the biggest thing to me is I will come to a little bit later. I think more is sometimes you don't know you've got a problem until you've stepped down the road of solving it, and then you look in retrospect, go, what were we thinking? Why? That was kind of easy to do. That was such a low-hanging fruit. And when you've sort of we've tangibly improved and reduced friction in our business, and we didn't realize quite how much friction was in our business until we made attempts at removing it, and then we realized actually there's quite a lot we can do here. So I think the horror story is actually not appreciating exactly what we can do with a properly functioning, even partially functioning CLM proposition.
Absolutely. Marie, what about you?
One for me is a process horror story, and one is a data or document. So I guess I'll start with, I worked at a company where, and obviously not naming names, but we didn't have any communication with IT about data retention. So we were all operating under the assumption that that's employees' emails and the documents that were attached in them were getting saved post termination, layoff, resignation, whatnot, right? So there was just this underlying assumption that if we wanted the contracts one day, we could find them, and that wasn't the case. So we had kind of a mass loss of contracts that was realized down the road. The other one was a process issue where it had just been a longstanding, the business had the autonomy to go out and get the final signature from the vendor or the counterparty or the customer. And no one explained to the business that a contract had to be signed by both parties. It had to be signed by them and by the other party. So when we finally got around to doing an audit, it turned out that like over 50% of the contracts were only signed by one person. So both those times, had me sweating and crying and questioning all my life decisions.
Wow. I can imagine. I don't think we're going to beat that. Yeah. Goodness me, half your contracts being invalid. Yeah, I could see a laughing emoji from Shy in the chat. My word. Okay, let's move on from that horror story, because we'll be thinking about it a long time, to areas to consider. So we look at the CLM evaluation process. Now, in my role, I get loads of RFIs, RFPs, requirements documents, and it's really interesting to find out kind of where they started and how they've been created and what the processes around it. And it'll be really interesting for Martin and Marie to share a lot of this with us. But if you look at a CLM product and you're going out to market to make a substantial investment in CLM and you've recognized you have a problem, what are the vital areas to consider? So I've come up with some suggestions here. Like, we often think collaboration is very important, because contract review isn't necessarily just legal. Then the contract negotiation process and tracking and understanding how you're actually speaking to the other side. And then the current tooling that's being used. So the change management process and how important that is. What areas are most important for you? Marie, we'll start with you this time.
So data is key. I think legal teams can immediately dive into CLM to understand not only just the turnaround time for a contract, but even like the very specific turnaround time. How long is it sitting with the business versus how long is it sitting with legal? How long did it get stuck with IT or with the customer? So that they can really start to prove that, if a contract's stuck for a month, it wasn't their fault, right? And then start to have some hard data around that. And then that can also that kind of data can lend itself towards, propositioning for more headcount, justifying more budget, looking at capacity, really understanding the capacity and bandwidth of the team. So data like that is one of the first ways that we can really get buy-in from the business to get a CLM and to make them committed for the long haul of rolling out a CLM. I think the other one, right, is immediate benefit. So there has to be an immediate, accessible. It's just like anyone who downloads an app on your phone, right? If you download a new app to try it and it's difficult to log in, it's difficult to figure out how to use it, it's not fun, people lose interest. So CLM needs to be the same. The users need to feel some immediate pleasure and ease from using it so that they're kind of bought in with the journey. And then I think as well, collaboration, right? I would say collaboration more in the integration sense. So you're walking into a company that already has a suite of tech that's built out by security, IT, privacy, whatnot, procurement. So the tool that legal is bringing in needs to work seamlessly with the other tech in the business so that legal isn't becoming legal isn't getting tagged again as a blocker or a disruptor or any other manner of names.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, legal are always the last through the door when it comes to implementing tech. So kind of like it or not, you are going to have to fit into an existing tech stack in order for it to make sense and be utilized. Martin, what about you? What are your thoughts?
So I'm from experience, what has worked for us really well is you've got to go into this identifying the must-haves right up front. So what are you actually trying to achieve? Actually, Marie, you kind of nailed it. There are the early wins, the low-hanging fruit requirements, and the must-haves. Just be realistic about that. Bite off what you think you can chew. Then we wrote a roadmap. So we're still on a journey, and we will be on the journey. We haven't used all the bits and pieces that the tool we use, which actually happens to be Summize, but we're not using everything. We plan to. Some of the things we don't even know we need yet, but we've written a roadmap. It not just includes CLM, but it includes a lot of legal design as well, and that was utterly essential to what we wanted to achieve out of that. So, and you're right, it's existing tech stack. That was a kind of a given. We weren't going to, something which integrated in our case. We implemented this really, really effective generation tool, which uses Slack. And we're a tech business, and Slack is ubiquitous. So, that helps as well. But be realistic about what you're trying to achieve. Don't try and boil the ocean. Is essential.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost managing, like we talk a lot about the tech maturity model here at Summize, and it's managing that maturity model in your sense, in your world. And what does that look like? And for some businesses, it might be like a 5-year period, but you can't try and bite off everything in one go. Okay, so next we have, so now you've looked at a lot of CLM vendors. I'll stay quiet for this one because obviously I'm representing one. But what are the most important things to ask a CLM vendor when you're in evaluation phase? Marie, we'll go with you.
I think looking at their existing relationships and partnerships. So looking at what existing out-of-box integrations they have. So things like Coupa, DocuSign, Salesforce, items like that, right? How Okta, how easy is it going to be to immediately plug this tool into your business? What roadmap items do they have down the road? Are they looking ahead at AI? Or are they looking at, focusing on a certain niche of integrations and partnerships? So that's key for me, because that allows me to create a real transparent roadmap for my company that align and make sure that the tool I pick aligns with my expectations and avoid disappointment or misalignment down the road. I think another one is security and privacy and data. So looking at compliance and how the data is being managed and how easy it is to kind of intake your existing internal security and privacy processes and work with this tool, and do they qualify for that? And then the other one, of course, for me that's huge is customer service. Are the people that are running this company that were hired as CSMs, do they understand you? Do they understand your job? Do they understand that you are, married to each other for the implementation, whether it takes 6 months or 3 years, and understand how to get you through the road bumps? Because, in-house and legal ops, you're doing the work, but if you don't have good customer service and you don't have a partner who understands you, it is a lot more difficult.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. What about you, Martin?
Definitely hit it on the head. I mean, for us, it was, number one was the type of tool we wanted when we looked around. We didn't want a tool or a solution which was everything to all people, because what that's, in our experience, and my experience as well, what we tended to find is those do everything, but not brilliantly or well or even at all, although they claim to. So test that what you want. Remember, when I said, what are your must-haves? Find a tool that has that, because odds on that tool will have and will develop over time, and will start bolting on things that will switch on other things that you may know you don't need at the moment. But what are your must-haves? Once you've got your must-haves, find a tool that does that really, really well. And I completely echo that. You need a lot of hand-holding initially, because you don't know what you don't know. And so, yeah, you're right around the CSM and that support in that early phase, even if just to get your own sort of ducks in a row around what it is, because you may have a very set idea about what you want to do. And I'm pretty sure that the vendors who are out there have faced that 100 different times. I mean, I do that, if look at your own business. I'm in the supply business to banks. We know way more than quite a lot of our customers on their problems they face. And the same is true in CLM providers as well. So that's a knowledge, that's a resource you should absolutely tap into.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Martin. We've had a question in the chat around implementation processes that our audience are interested to kind of hear a bit of a definition from you both on that. So what I think the best way to think about it is what did that implementation of a CLM tool look like internally? How did you define it, plot it, and what did that process look like? Martin, we'll go back to you first.
Sure. So what we wanted to do was have a very quick win. So we were carried through the business on the back of a shield with everyone cheering. So we set some definable parameters. We had, if you like, it's like starting a job. We had a 100-day plan and our 200-day plan, and we said, this is what we want to do first, which was quite a simple thing, actually. We want to automate our NDAs using our Slack. And the tool that we chose, Summize, actually does that brilliantly well and was automated really quickly, really simply, with a bit of legal design added on top, and it had some amazing effects. And those quick wins, suddenly everyone was interested, because it involved a whole bunch of folks in the business, and it benefited them, because suddenly they were self-servicing, stuff that used to take ages. I mean, I've got a stat that prior to implementation, we do on average in our world around 10 to 15 NDAs a week, more or less. I'm sure there's businesses out there who do a lot more than that, but that's our sort of cadence. And of those 10, we reckoned, looking back, about 8 of them required legal input. When we went into the automation tool, we looked at all of that, looked at the way that where were we negotiating all the time, and just took that off the table. So we did a lot of legal design on the actual document we used, but also then we used the Slack integration and put that in. And that suddenly after it, we get 1 a week now referred to us. So it's had a huge impact. So that was the very first thing. What's that quick win? And then look out. We've got a saying in our team: publish then polish, because there's no point waiting for perfection, because you won't achieve it. So get something done and then get the next thing done. And then after about 6 months, you suddenly look back and go, look at what we've done. So that was our approach. Just one thing at a time and move us forward.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's great advice. Marie, what about you? How would you define that implementation flow?
Yeah, I love what you said about iteration, Martin. That's a big one, right? I've done it a couple different ways in different companies, depending on what the order of priority was. So I've worked in one situation where we did a stealth launch, and we focused on legacy upload and got all the old documents in, so we could do like a, poof, grand reveal, here's all your data and documents, and then we built the workflows from there. And then I've also done one where just getting a standard measure of intake with, very basic workflows was enough of a win. And then I've done others where exactly like we automated NDAs, automated SOWs, got DPAs going, things like that. So quick wins are key. And then usually I've always implemented one team at a time. I've never tried to do multiple teams at a time, just because I don't want to get fired. So usually for me in my world, that's been procurement. So usually it's procurement that's the first one to go, just because vendor contracts are pretty standard form. Lots of great historical data. They usually have their own processes in place, so it's fairly easy to collaborate with them and get things running. And it has the most impact on the internal users as well. So one team at a time, and then, maybe doing a case study with them, or having them give input on training materials, and having them kind of be your champion, so that as you onboard the other teams, there's already that, like, the momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. One team at a time, definitely, because you'll be engaging with different stakeholders, and they'll be in different stages of their own process with different priorities. It's important to focus. I hope that answered your question, and that is everything you want to. I can see. Thank you. So thank you both. Question answered, and very much appreciated from those in the chat. Feel free to ping any other questions you have into the chat. We'll try our best to answer them throughout or at the end. Okay, so we're going to be quick on this one, because I've realized we are already enjoying ourselves too much and running out of time. So how do you include the rest of the business? So Marie, what is the best way to get everybody else on side? We've kind of already covered it in a bit, but if you were to summarize.
I keep it simple, and I start with a really strong project charter from the get-go. So I set up, a streamlined project charter, maybe an Asana board, Slack channel, right? You just make sure that everyone has input from the beginning. Just planning out the calls, planning out the roadmap, so you know who needs to be on what call, scheduling ahead of time, constantly giving updates in that channel so that people can passively intake that information. And then just obviously make it easy for yourself to go get that information. Don't start moving forward and then try to loop people in later on. So just build the plan, and then stage those calls and execute it, and just make sure you're taking opinions from, at minimum, one person from finance, one person for procurement, one person from IT, security, engineering, if that's a joint department, right? So just making sure you get that feedback early.
Great. What about you, Martin?
I think to sort of federalize the problem. So we basically, we have super users in each of the areas, and what those folks are is, so I'll give you sort of the two major users of our tool are sales, commercial, and partnerships, who do the deals with partners, not the end customers. And in each of those, plus it's now been expanded to other groups. The payments team, for example, within each of those groups, there are people in there who we've brought into the fold who are essentially super users, and they know what we're doing, and essentially they're doing it themselves now. So they kind of, it starts to perpetuate itself, and they bring lots of ideas because they're the ones within their departments going, hey guys, we would love it if this happened. And we go, well, we can do that. That's not a problem. We'll tweak it, twist it this way. And so it starts to generate, really quite rich, inclusive, feedback as well, because as these people, as those functions start using it, they'll go, hey, can we use it this way? And those sort of things come out. So implementation, bringing the audience, who, the people who's going to benefit from some of this stuff in as a super user is we found very effective.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think that's essential. They can also help train everybody else, which limits time as well. Right. Next, we've got a poll. So what position are you in? Do you have a CLM tool already in place? Do you like it if you do? Do you not like it if you do? And who is sitting there with manual processes wondering what to do going forward? Yeah. So about half of you have nothing at all.
There's not a lot of love for the existing tools out there, is there?
No. There's a Forrester stat we talk about quite a lot, and we're not going to include ourselves in this, obviously, but in the CLM market, a huge amount, I think it's something 70-something% of CLM projects do fail just due to poor implementation and adoption. So it's not surprising.
I love that statistic.
Yeah, I need to find the exact statistic, but yeah, it's a Forrester stat. I'll have to look it up. Okay, so most people don't have a CLM here. So there is obviously, I hope everyone's listening out for advice in evaluation and implementation, definitely, because a lot of the things covered here are vital. Okay, so next we're going to have a look at some use cases, and we're going to discuss AI. Now, AI has been huge, obviously, in the news, actually, both in the last couple of days. But if we look at the whole of the last kind of year, since ChatGPT went to market to everybody and made themselves available and generative AI available to pretty much everybody through their phones, the world has changed quite a lot. And I want to understand how legal has adapted to that, what opinions you're hearing, both Martin and Marie, from the industry around the use of AI. How comfortable are our businesses with it at the moment? Marie, we'll start with you.
Yeah, the most recent use case that when I was at HubSpot, we did an AI beta program, and in a couple different areas, and most of it obviously is focused on either doc generation or playbooks or kind of automating the kind of creation of legal documents. And I think I saw mostly curiosity. Obviously, there was a little skepticism about the idea of relying fully on the generated text, without having the knowledge or fallback. So I think what I've consistently heard from lawyers is, well, if we start having people use this, like, how do we know that we can trust them to be the backup, or what about the next generation of lawyers? Are they going to be able to identify right from wrong? Because I know best what I know in my gut, after years of doing this manually, what smells right and what doesn't. So I think that 50-50 for me, right? There's lots of curiosity, but also healthy skepticism.
Great. What about you, Martin?
I mean, look, I work in the financial services industry, which is essentially the tech equivalent of the steam engine. So their adoption of AI is going to be cautious. Let me use that word. But I mean, look, if you look at the regulators, they're all getting involved. I know the UK regulators just issued some guidance. There's a whole bunch of regulators around the world that are coming out recently with guidance around use of AI within their industry. We as a company approach it very cautiously because of security concerns and data leakage concerns. We do not have it in our business at the moment. Our tool doesn't need to be AI. It isn't that thing. That's not our bag. But in terms of our own internal usage, we are actually looking at use cases for it to see how it might speed up a whole bunch of stuff. For example, along our support and maintenance track, for example, being able to look at libraries of problems to quickly solve repeat problems and incidents that might come up, where solutions, particularly where we've got multiple teams around the world, that might be dealing with similar issues, that can be quite a useful thing. But again, we're looking at it with one eye open and one eye closed, going, okay, but how do we safeguard it against doing something unintended?
Understood. I mean, I think for us sometimes as a tech vendor, we can get carried away with AI and how it's going to change the world and all of the benefits it can have. And I think at Summize, we're constantly taking a bit of a temperature check from our client base. We're doing a lot of beta testing, always a lot of beta testing with the product and with different customers to understand how it's actually going to help rather than forcing it down people's throats. And obviously it being an opt-in, opt-out. So if you don't want to use generative AI at all, you can opt out wholesale and still use the product very effectively. But it's always interesting, and it will come up throughout this. We'll do a little bit more on AI later. But yeah, I've got a question in the chat regarding how do we manage outside law firms' utilization of AI? Any ideas, either of you?
They're simply telling you. Yeah, I mean, if you're paying for a lawyer and they're generating it through ChatGPT, you need to know about that.
Yeah. Looks like we've got another comment around accuracy as well. Law firms drafting a brief with fake cases. Indeed. Marie, anything to add on the outside counsel point?
Yeah, I think most of the ways that we set expectations with outside counsel is through those guidelines. So just including if you have internal policies about safe use of AI, including those in the guidelines, or just including a clause preemptively saying we're not comfortable with you using AI unless we have a discussion about it. And also, you know, from my own selfish end, right, if you're going to use AI, I don't want to see a bunch of hours on the bill either. We want to get this back. Thanks. And please.
We not only want to use it, we want to know exactly how you're using it for, you know.
Yeah. Transparency, I think, is the best way to summarize it. What have we got next? Okay, some solution stuff. So tech nuts and bolts for us to discuss and me to show you. How does CLM actually work? So we're going to start with, in a practical sense, template management and contract generation. We've talked a lot about this already. What I'll do is just kind of summarize what we've already said around templates and wanting to automate. Obviously, Martin started off with NDAs and you're looking at kind of 10 to 12 a week and putting in place a process for NDAs through a Slack bot you use to generate, don't you, Martin?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Yeah, Marie, you said you automated a whole bunch of contracts, from a DPA to an order. Where were you making those available? Was it kind of via a SharePoint platform or via the CLM itself?
Via the CLM. Obviously, if I have a CLM, prior to that, it would have been, you know, like a public template and, you know, just instructing users to how to make a copy, how to send it to the vendor, thing, you know, but ideally you have workflows for each template, and then the questions are automatically turning into a finalized document that just automatically pops out to the vendor for review.
Absolutely. It's exactly how we manage it too. So feel free to put in the chat where your templates are. Do you make them available to the business? How well do the business utilize them? How often do you have to correct them? However, when you're categorizing templates, this is a really kind of simple categorization system you could use. What we normally do in implementation at Summize is look at, first of all, the ones that can be fully self-service. So the ones that don't need any kind of touch from a lawyer or from your contract review team. They can just go out and be filled in, and you know they can be self-managed. Then break down into the ones that are self-service but need an approval. I can see somebody's just put water templates in the chat. Okay, yeah. Speak to us afterwards. I'm sure there's more and more questions. We can help, don't worry. So self-service with approvals where, you know, it can be generated but somebody has to approve it. Then you've got the collaborative templates where it needs several different kind of people to come in and give their input in order to complete that draft. And then there were the ones that should just be for lawyers and, you know, need to be drafted by legal and quite closely negotiated. Maybe they are kind of almost co-drafted with the counterparty. And those are your template categories. It's important when you go into a CLM project, have at least in your mind what templates you have that fit into each bucket, and everything will be much, much easier. And here's a little kind of checklist here. So again, we're just recapping stuff we've already talked about. Have a look at the tooling that your internal customers use. How does it vary by department? So it might be, I mean, we talk about legal front door at Summize. You might have, for example, everybody enterprise-wide like Martin using Slack. You might be a Microsoft Teams house. You might be very Salesforce heavy, really commercial organization. You might already have like a ticketing system in IT that everyone uses in something like Jira. Where does it make sense to put that legal front door? And then which departments are easiest to work with? I know, Marie, you said focus on one team at a time. Who can you make the heroes? Martin said, which departments have particular problems? What are they looking for? Decide on those and then decide on your rollout stages throughout. And then Obviously, if you're with Summize, as we'd love you to be, you'll end up with something like this. So this is our generation flow through Microsoft Teams. And Microsoft Teams is pretty good for this kind of generation process because it gives you a really nice kind of chatbot style interface. But it's also familiar to everybody in the business and easy to use. Everybody kind of lives in Teams for at least part of their working day. So it becomes a really good choice for contract generation through a legal front door. And it's going to increase adoption. If it's easy to use, then people are going to adopt it a lot quicker. Intake is also always a thorny issue when we speak to businesses. It's I think where a lot of the friction lies between commercial and legal, I would say, unsolicited emails. So I'd like to understand your take, both of you, on the review process, how you understand reviewers, standardization tooling. How do you stop salespeople forwarding an email to you and just putting FYI, please look at this? Marie, how do we stop that?
No, I usually work very closely with the teams to lock down the processes and avoid situations where there's like those runarounds, right? So, I mean, obviously it's great with Summize because if you go through Slack, it's the only way to get in, right? So usually what we do is we build a process, and with the training we roll out and say like the only way to get your contract signed is if it's in the CLM, because the only people with access to the signatures are the people who administrate the CLM or who have submitted a workflow in the CLM. So kind of cutting off the other resources. So usually we band up with procurement and finance and lock it down. So that way nothing can go around the CLM and get paid, or nothing can go around procurement, because if they don't see it in the CLM, then they know that something went wrong. So that's usually how we handle situations like that. And then of course, building in the automated reviewers and approvers in the CLM makes it even better, right? Because we're taking the effort away from the person who has to submit, because it's already annoying enough to them that they have to follow a new process and submit in the first place. So at least at the very minimum, we can guarantee that once you do, your reviewers will be tagged, they'll know what to do, that we've got your back, we've got you taken care of, and go from there.
Right. What about you, Martin? How do you stop the emails?
Well, I mean, there's a supposition in that we have, which we have not. But I mean, so I think with our little world, we've done a couple of things. Well, number one is we've used, exactly as you say, Marie, we've used for certain things. So, for example, NDAs and trial agreements, which are two of the most volumetric bits in our business, because they're the stuff that happens a lot. And some of the partnership stuff around logo share agreements and blah, 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 things like that, which makes sense in our world. That stuff we've just pared down and it's gone into the tool, and you only get access to that through the tool, and we ignore anything that comes to us. On the rest of it, which all requires that if it's not in that, then it requires our input for the most part. The first thing we did is just triage the problem by having a shared inbox, legal at, and then we have a little sort of gating system that we use internally. But that is very much, I said we've got a roadmap. That's on our roadmap now, and we are investigating how we look at that. But we are balancing. One of the things that I always find I struggle a bit with this is I don't want to over automate and over processize, is that a real word? Processize it too much, because I think there is value, as certain from the way I operate the world, there is value in that interaction. I don't want legal to become a post box, and so that's a real balancing act. Where the temptation is to just we want everything in our little controlled little boxes, but then we just become a post box, and we get pushed further into the background. And I'm very much of we're part of the business, and we're an integral part of the business.
Absolutely. So, types of intake then, some basics. So who sent you contracts and why is important? So as Martin said, you don't necessarily want to automate every single process. You don't want it to feel too kind of stilted and too, like legal are putting boxes around everything. So triage is really important. So how do you manage the way you deal with certain agreements? What does your team look like? Managing your team is really important. So do you have a team of generalists or specialists? Do certain requests have to go to certain people? In which case, automation may make absolute sense. Internal customers. Are they able to be involved in the process? So a lot of businesses come to us at Summize looking for self-service. So what kind of reviews can be completed by commercial teams, for example? And then how involved do those departments actually want to be? So is there the drive for sales to start reviewing their own contracts? Potentially. Have a look at your organization and make that judgment. And then approvals are obviously incredibly key. But what at Summize, we obviously believe in the legal front door. As I've said before, we can run these kind of processes through teams. So what, Martin, you'll probably expect in Slack to come as part of the longer term your roadmap is putting some of these kind of review flows into a chatbot or into a legal front door in a Salesforce or a Jira or somewhere like that, where users can upload contracts, can answer questions, can monitor what is going on in the background. So they're not constantly badgering you with emails, but can all be done through a familiar environment that they're used to using. But it's something we really focus in on in implementation and try and break up those different use cases. So we've got a poll here. We're going to go back to AI slightly. Are you using it when you're contracting? Is anybody using AI yet? It all feels like quite a new thing, but a year has gone by since ChatGPT.
I mean, I've used it once, but I'm a bit reticent. I've used it in anger in our business, but I'm a bit reticent about admitting to it, I'll be honest with you. I did it because I have to, well, the legal, you know, when you have to do the reviews, actually for all the internal lawyers, this is a real big hack actually. You know, the chambers and all the legal guides that come at you twice a year to say, hey, review XYZ law firm for their awards. I did all of them on ChatGPT, but you know, that's me letting a secret out, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so I have been known, I mean, we use OpenAI as part of our product, but I've been known to use AI to research things that I do not understand that lawyers say. And it's very, very useful at providing kind of simple run-of-the-mill explanations for people like me. Marie, are you using it much kind of day to day?
I mean, when I was in-house, I was using it to, I would say one of the ways I used it was if I wanted to send emails or communications out. So like, for example, when I was planning email blasts out for our new outside counsel guidelines, if I had to do some kind of internal communication and I wanted to just quickly spin up a very cute email to a large group of people on a very niche topic, I just typed it into ChatGPT and it popped out my email and I made a few adjustments and work done. So I like it in that sense. It also helps with some like first drafts of creative copywriting, maybe for PowerPoints and stuff like that. Now I feel like, of course, now with Amplifi, AI is becoming my life because I'm trying to build AI for project management. So very, very heavily focused on the future of AI and where it's going.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, and it looks like from the results on this poll that a lot of people find it interesting but aren't actually using it yet. So I think maybe you can try kind of Martin and Marie's different hacks there. Try the end user software and then have a look at software like Summize if you want to kind of start using AI in the contracting process. Next, what have we got? I want to show you a little bit of AI review in Summize because I am a bit of an AI nerd. I love generative AI and I like kind of tweaking it and playing with it in my role. This is an example of using AI firstly from a summary to find a term in a contract and then comparing it with something you have stored. So if you've got your templates or kind of stored standard positions, things you've negotiated in the past, maybe that amazing clause that you drafted in a prior agreement that you're constantly going back to and copying and pasting into new negotiations, you can start to use AI to compare to that information using chatbots like the one you see in Summize. It might be that you're asking it to redraft. Here on the screen here, you've got a termination convenience clause. Not only is it redrafting based on the information that's in your playbook or in your agreed positions, but it's also taking into account the document that you're actually looking at. So you're drafting something that feels natural. Like the big gain in AI in the last year is it's kind of turned into a natural language has become much more important and it's much less formulaic than it used to be. And it's very, very good at mimicking human behavior. So try it and let us know what your experience is. And then lastly, we're going to have a look at contract storage and reporting. So storing contracts, we just want to ask you a question first of all. Do you know where your contracts are? I'm hoping there is nobody that says, I have no idea. but there was last time. And we've already got one. There we go. Straight away. Straight away. I would say this is where are your contracts? Where are the majority of your contracts? You don't necessarily have to account for every single one. It'd be nice if you could. So mostly we've got cloud storage platforms or offline storage systems. Of those of you who are using CLMs, as we'd expect, they are probably in that CLM. I see. A lot using cloud storage. I presume that is kind of Box or SharePoint or similar. I see. But there's one person with no idea whatsoever. I see. I've got somebody in the chat saying split between a legacy SharePoint system and a CLM for new contracts. So you drew, Joe, I see, you drew a line in the sand. So there was we're starting the CLM today. That day is kind of day one, and everything else is going to be in an archive. That's also a popular tactic we find. Really quickly, because I know we're running out of time, and I know, Marie, you've got to drop off soon. So where are your contracts? What is important about storage? If you were to say one thing that is really important from a storage solution, what should it be, Martin?
I mean, from my perspective, in my world, it's availability and being able to find it. Because if you can't find it, you've got nowhere to go from there. So
absolutely. Marie, what about you?
Yeah, I think just really understanding the consequences of the choice you make. So whether you invest in uploading all your legacy documents into the CLM, or whether, like, for example, like Joe said in the comments, so you do a split. I've worked in both environments, and you just need to understand the consequences of both, right? So you need to make sure that if you do have your legacy in the SharePoint, for example, it needs to be a filing system. There needs to be, set names. It needs to be easy to find. And you need to also make sure that you have the bandwidth on your team. If you have an audit, for example, I know I went through when COVID started, we had like a mass cancellation of event contracts, and we had to go figure out the force majeure clause. And that would have been absolutely impossible. I think we had at least a minimum number in the CLM at that point. We hadn't finished the legacy upload, but if that had not happened, I don't know what we would have done. So just kind of understanding and being transparent with the business as to if we're not going to make this investment, this is where we could be a year from now.
Yeah, and it comes back to the most important thing is let's not boil the ocean every single time. You don't have to reach perfection. The example that Joe has in his own organization is a perfect and classic one. Sometimes you just got to go, we're not going to solve that problem, but we need to solve this problem.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
And I do agree with some of the comments that, like, it is also important to understand that I agree with, like, you may not have the bandwidth or the money to do a legacy upload. I have personally not experienced a point where legacy upload is not manual in some instance, especially because of how complex legal language is and how all contracts are formatted differently, right? So it is a huge undertaking.
Agreed. I think, with a repository for us, you need to be able to find a contract and you know what's in it. I mean, if you can do those two things, you're pretty much ticking the box. And naming convention, you mentioned, it always staggers me the amount of contracts we get through, kind of big zip files full of agreements that you really wouldn't know what was in them unless you open them up, not even know what type they were or who they were with. So naming conventions are incredibly important. Here's a to-do list for you. So important is folder structure. First of all, if you already have a folder structure, does it work for you? And if it does, can you replicate it in your CLM? That is something to always discuss with CLM vendors, because a lot of business stakeholders will be very attached to their folder structures. And again, limiting change management is very, very important. So if you can replicate something that already exists in a CLM platform, then you'll be much, much further ahead than if you try and change it. And then which departments should have access to which contracts? I mean, that's clear. Are there privacy reasons why different departments can't have access? What kind of walls are you going to put up around your different folders within your folder structure? Responsibility. So who owns a contract once it's been signed? Is that legal's job? Do you have a contracts team? Is it procurement? Is it the commercial team, whoever actioned the signing of the contract? And how actively are they going to be managed? And then what is your regular reporting? What do you have to look like? What does it have to look like? Are you going to board meetings on a regular basis where you have to report on certain customer or supplier agreements? Do you have any events coming up in the future that mean you're going to have to do some element of due diligence? It's always important to keep those in mind if you are migrating a repository in CLM. And then what we want to give you is this. So the ability to be able to use a summary of a contract. So for those who haven't seen Summize, Summize creates a summary of contracts when they come in. We like to summarize everything. That's exactly what we do. And what that enables you to do is link a clause in your summary to a party and then to find those contracts very, very easily. So when you get those ad hoc questions, it's very, very easy to find the answer to them. And then for the more substantial reporting, you can then report on those summaries. So for instance, here we're looking at some services agreements. We want to create a due diligence report in order to go to the board with some specific information in. Here we're looking for contracts with, Marie, this is your example, this is a force majeure clause. So we're trying to find that subset of information and then creating a beautiful view that we can export to a spreadsheet. It's important when you set up your CLM that you make sure it's got all of these abilities and that it's not too much of a manual process and you're not having to manually tag information constantly, because any manual work will mean that people are less likely to follow that process. Okay, we got there. Questions? I know we've had lots as we've been ongoing, but feel free. Marie, I know you need to drop off, I think. So Marie's going to say goodbye to us here. Thank you very much for your involvement and your advice.
Thank you so much. And yeah, anyone feel free to reach out to me with questions about CLM, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Marie. And thank you, Jonny and Martin and Summize, for another great webinar. Folks, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I had a few questions from somebody who wanted to better understand how CLMs work, like ABCs of CLM. Maybe that'll be the next webinar we do. Where do you start? Like, let's take an NDA, right? We talked about NDAs a lot today. Can you just describe what the process is for, I guess, implementing a CLM and then optimizing NDAs for, within the CLM?
Jonny, do you want to take it? Because I mean, I can certainly talk about implementing it, but from a Summize, from a sort of CLM functionality point of view, I think that's more your bag. Yeah,
okay. So first of all, I would start with the template, work out kind of what you're working with currently. So have you, I actually saw somebody in the chat started using one NDA. So have you already got a set template that you can just hammer out to the rest of the business and just start using? If you haven't got a template, you're going to need to kind of get hold of one. Once you have, work out what the variables are within it. That's the kind of first stage of your CLM process. So if you sign this document with party A, B, or C, how does the document differ in each case? And then what you need to do is provide that flexibility through a CLM tool for whoever's filling it in to make those choices, but for there to be visibility of those choices throughout the process. So I'd start with that template. I think that's the easiest place to start with CLM and with legal design. Start with the terms and then work out from there. Also, it helps, as we've discussed today, to have the people involved who is going to be part of that process of generating that contract, who needs to approve it, where are they, how are they going to do it? And if you can match the kind of process-led things like legal design and templates to the people that are going to be doing it, then you'll start to build up a picture of what you need before you really even get to the software.
Martin, the other thing I'd add to that, and it's a bit about my background. It's something that before I was a lawyer, I was an engineer. I was a chemical engineer. There's a process in that called HAZOP. Okay, and what HAZOP is because you don't just build a chemical plant or a nuclear facility or a biochem plant or whatever. You don't just build them and go, hope it works. You do what's known as a HAZOP on it. Yeah, and that goes down to the nth degree of the hazard and operability of that system, right? It's something that I brought into the legal world. So when we've done this on our NDAs, we've done it on our trial agreements, we've done our customer agreements, our SaaS agreements, our partnership agreements, and we're slowly sort of moving through, sweeping through. And it does require some discipline, and it does require you taking a little bit of time out of the BAU. But what we do is, and I mentioned publish then polish, is when we were putting out new contracts or a new NDA, we created our first version of it, and it was far from perfect. But then twice a year, we will have formal HAZOPs on those documents. And there's a bit of discipline around it. Everyone comes together. We take an hour or 2 hours or whatever time period we need. We don't stretch it too long, but people come with the data going, these are the pain points in negotiations. These are the issues. We pool those and then we solve them and we increment and move forward. And what we've done over time is create a whole set of documents that have got better and better and better and reduce the amount of friction over time. And then when you then wrap CLMs around that, and you've got a really powerful CLM tool sets and functionality like, you know, the metadata and AI and the rest of it, you've got a really, really powerful solution then. And the point being is you don't have to do it in one go. You can do it in iterative processes, but it's worth taking that discipline and time where you get everybody who's really involved and go, why is this? Show me the points. It's a kind of data analyst, really. Show me the points that are causing us pains.
Awesome. All right. I think we'll wrap up here. Thank you again. Unless, if there's any questions, feel free to put them in now, but otherwise we'll wrap up. Jonny and Martin, any last remarks before we sign off?
I'll let Martin go first.
Good luck out there. I think the answer from me is, we didn't know where we were going to start when we wanted to do it, and we didn't know really what we wanted, but we knew we wanted these things, and we could box them out. And that's, I guess, my message is that's enough as a starting point. Let's do that, and then do the next thing. And before long, you've kind of done a whole bunch of stuff, and that's what's worked for us really well.
Right. I mean, from our perspective, we try our best to balance technology with lawyers' needs and also wider business needs. It's very, very important to us that people use our tool. CLM isn't just something to be sold, it's something to be used. And if you want to kind of cautiously investigate implementing a tool, if you reach out to me on LinkedIn or find us through the hashtag here, if you want a personalized demo, we'll start to scope your project. And as Martin says, as Marie said, we can iterate it. We can go step by step and work out how we can move at a pace that suits you, makes sense with yourselves and your processes, and then you can be as successful as Martin's found himself here today using our Slack bot. But thank you very much for listening. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone as well.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank
absolutely.
you, Jonny. We have a couple of questions that came in, actually. So last minute buzzer beaters. What QA, QC steps can be applied to confirm that the company users are selecting the right choices when populating the template?
I mean, Jonny, you can answer from thing, but I mean, the tools that we use, i.e. Summize, enforce that discipline. So, yeah. And we've chosen to have that, turned on in its fullest. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you can either enforce it with set options, or you can have free text fields whereby if users don't put specific answers, then you can generate tasks for approval. So it's always going to go to somebody else after the fact anyway, before it's generated.
Yeah.
All right. Great. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. If you want a copy of the recording, that'll be available next week. If you want the slides, are available in the chat. You can email us for a copy as well if you didn't see them. I hope everybody has a wonderful Thanksgiving, a wonderful long weekend.